Have you ever looked back on a decision and thought, what was I thinking? Truth is, you weren't. You were feeling, and feelings make terrible advisors when the stakes are high. Most people don't think. They react. They confuse speed for clarity. They chase urgency over truth. And then they wonder why their life feels chaotic. But the Stoics knew better. They trained their minds not to react, but to pause, question, and choose. Deliberately, Marcus Aurelius said, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind." So what happens when your thinking is shallow, rushed, or borrowed? This video is your wake-up call. 7 Stoic strategies that will rebuild your thinking from the inside out. Not for debates, not for trivia, but for decisions that shape your peace, your purpose, your entire life. When you learn to think clearly, you don't just make better choices, you become someone who's no longer controlled by impulse, opinion, or fear. If you're ready to stop thinking like everyone else and start thinking like a Stoic, hit that like button, subscribe to reclaim your clarity, your calm, and your control.
Number 1.
Clarify the central issue. Before you act, ask yourself, what am I really trying to solve? This is where most people fail. They react to surface-level emotions, urgency, fear, pride, and call it a decision. But a Stoic does not move based on the noise of the world or the chaos of the moment. A Stoic moves only after they've gone to war with confusion and emerged with clarity. Seneca wrote, "If a man knows not to which port he sails, no wind is favorable." What he meant is profound. No amount of action can help you if your aim is misaligned. You can hustle all you want, but if you're aiming at the wrong thing, you're not progressing. You're drifting, and worst of all, you're building a life that may look successful on the outside, but feel hollow on the inside. To clarify the central issue, you must first separate what you want from what you've been told to want. This is where most modern suffering originates. People think they're chasing their dreams, but they're actually chasing borrowed expectations, handed to them by culture, peers, or family. And it leaves them exhausted, confused, unfulfilled. Take this example. You're offered a promotion that requires longer hours, a bigger city, more stress, but also more status. Your gut might say yes, more money, more validation. But stop. Is this what you truly want? Or are you reacting to pressure, afraid of seeming unambitious? Is this aligned with your values or just your vanity? Epictetus warned his students to inspect every impression. He said, "When something happens, the only thing in your power is your response. But to respond wisely, you must first see clearly. And clarity doesn't come from speed. It comes from stillness, from asking the uncomfortable question, is this my path or someone else's?" Clarity begins with self-interrogation. You must dig past the ego, past the social mask, and touch the core of your intent. Ask yourself, what am I afraid of if I don't do this? Sharpen, what would I do if no one were watching? What outcome would bring me inner peace, not just applause? This is how you untangle the real issue, not by moving faster, but by getting quieter. Consider the life of Viktor Frankl. While imprisoned in a concentration camp, he found that even when stripped of all external freedoms, he still had the power to choose his perspective. And in that power, he found purpose. He later wrote, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." Frankl's clarity was not circumstantial. It was internal, anchored to meaning, not reaction. That is the essence of Stoic decision-making. Steve Jobs, too, understood this principle. Despite all his flaws, he built Apple not by copying others, but by listening to something quieter. Intuition aligned with purpose. He said, "Have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become, but that voice, your own, can only be heard in silence." That's what Stoic clarity gives you. Not a perfect plan, but a firm anchor, a guiding star in moments of fog. And clarity isn't a one-time insight, it's a daily discipline. Every decision must begin here. Before you weigh options, before you analyze risks, before you gather data, you must first ask, what exactly am I trying to solve? Because if you climb the wrong ladder, it doesn't matter how fast you climb, you'll still end up somewhere you don't belong. That's why the Stoics didn't rush. They questioned, they paused, they cleared the emotional debris from their vision before they stepped forward. So the next time life demands a decision, don't just act, don't just think, question the question itself. Find the true root, cut through the noise, and anchor yourself to the only thing that matters, what's essential. This is where wisdom begins and confusion ends.
Number 2.
Gather all relevant information. Once you've clarified what truly matters, the next step is to seek truth, not just information, and that's harder than ever. We live in an age where data is constant, opinions are weaponized, and noise is endless. But the Stoic mind isn't interested in volume. It's interested in value. You don't need more input, you need the right input. The Stoics taught that the disciplined mind filters what it consumes. Just as you wouldn't let anyone into your home, you shouldn't let every idea into your head. Epictetus warned his students to guard their thoughts like a fortress. He said, "It is the action of an untrained person to blame others for their misfortunes. But the wise man, when he meets obstacles, first examines himself." In other words, if your beliefs are built on weak foundations, the fault is not in the facts, it's in the filters. So how do you build those filters? By being radically honest about where your information comes from and who benefits from it. When you hear a bold claim, don't just ask if it's persuasive, ask, who profits if I believe this? What motive might be hidden behind this message? We often confuse being informed with being wise, but the two are not the same. You can read every headline, scroll every feed, and still be misled. If you don't question the source, the Stoics didn't chase stimulation. They chased insight. They read slowly, thought deeply, and sought knowledge that aligned with nature, reason, and virtue. Take Nassim Nicholas Taleb, author of The Black Swan. He doesn't follow mainstream news. He calls most of it noise pollution. Instead, he reads history, mathematics, ancient texts, sources that don't change every 5 minutes. Why? Because he wants signal, not noise, perspective, not panic. He's not trying to win today's argument. He's trying to see clearly for a lifetime. And this mindset is rare because it requires discipline. It requires you to admit you don't know everything and to stop pretending you do. That's why the Stoics didn't just gather facts. They filtered them through virtue. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change." That's the mark of real intelligence. Openness to truth, even when it contradicts your current view. Imagine someone deciding whether to start their own business. They watch a few viral TikToks that promise instant success, and they leap, but they never ask, what are the risks? What's the failure rate? What skills do I actually need? Stoic thinking refuses to be seduced by hype. It demands a wider lens. Gathering information isn't just about consuming, it's about discriminating. It's about slowing down long enough to notice what's missing, what hasn't been said. What data would make this conclusion less certain? That's real critical thinking, not just agreeing with what sounds smart, but challenging it until what remains is solid. Charlie Munger, the late vice chairman of Berkshire Hathaway, once said, "I never allow myself to have an opinion on anything that I don't know the other side's argument better than they do." That's Stoicism in action, humility, patience, and thoroughness. And it shows because his decisions lasted. Wisdom doesn't shout, it whispers. And if you're always plugged in, always reacting, you'll never hear it. So make it a habit. Before you form an opinion, gather the facts, real facts, from people who've earned their insight, not those who've optimized their content for clicks. Gather slowly, filter fiercely, seek truth, not just agreement. Because what you feed your mind becomes your worldview, and your worldview becomes your life. A Stoic doesn't need to know everything, just the essential things from trustworthy places. That's what makes their thinking unshakable. That's what makes it free.
Number 3.
Ask probing questions. Information alone isn't wisdom. You can gather facts endlessly and still be a poor thinker if you never challenge what you know. The Stoic mind isn't just about consuming truth, it's about testing it. It sharpens itself by asking hard questions, and those who don't question, obey blindly. The first enemy of critical thinking is assumption. We assume what we read is true. We assume our memory is accurate. We assume our beliefs are rational. But Epictetus warned against this kind of intellectual laziness. He said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." That begins with defining, doubting, and drilling deeper. So when something sounds true, don't accept it. Challenge it. Play devil's advocate. Ask, what would it take to prove this wrong? Where's the evidence? What assumptions am I standing on? Stoics weren't afraid of contradiction. They embraced it as a tool to refine clarity. Take Socrates. He wasn't technically a Stoic, but he inspired the entire Stoic lineage. His method? Asking questions until the illusion of knowledge broke apart. He believed wisdom wasn't about knowing more. It was about realizing how little you truly know. Through relentless questioning, he helped others uncover truth, not by teaching them facts, but by forcing them to confront contradictions. This discipline is especially vital today, where speed is rewarded over depth. Social media trains you to form conclusions in seconds. But Stoic thinking demands you doubt on purpose. You hear something that fits your worldview? That's exactly when you should pause and ask, why do I believe this? And what would it take to change my mind? You hear someone say, wake up at 5 a.m. to be successful. Sounds productive, but is it true for everyone? What kind of success are they defining? Could someone wake at 8 a.m. and still live a meaningful life? A probing mind doesn't mock such advice. It just refuses to follow it blindly. Even your own thoughts must be tested. You feel unworthy. Ask, is that a fact or a feeling? You think someone disrespected you. Ask, am I reacting to what they said or to something inside me? You believe you're not ready. Ask, ready by whose standards? Marcus Aurelius wrote, if someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change. For I seek the truth by which no one was ever truly harmed. This is what separates the wise from the clever. Clever people defend their ideas. Wise people interrogate them. One of the greatest modern thinkers, Richard Feynman, had a rule. The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. That's why the Stoics emphasize self-examination. The ego resists questions, but the mind that seeks clarity welcomes them. Now consider this. How often do you argue not to learn, but to win? How often do you seek facts not to understand, but to confirm what you already believe? That's not thinking, it's performance, and it's the opposite of Stoic practice. Jeff Bezos once said the smartest people he knows are constantly revising their understanding, reconsidering a problem they thought they'd already solved. That's not indecision, it's strength, it's humility in action. So train your mind to ask deeper questions. Ask, what am I missing? Ask, what would I believe if I grew up in a different culture? Ask, what would this look like from the outside? Every probing question is a blade that cuts through illusion, and every illusion cut away brings you closer to peace. Because truth is not loud, it's buried. Beneath fear, beneath habit, beneath ego, and only the disciplined thinker is willing to dig for it. Ask harder questions, and life will give you softer answers.
Number 4.
Weigh implications and consequences. Most people don't think past the first step. They ask, what happens if I do this? But rarely, what happens after that? Stoic thinking, however, is built on foresight. It's the practice of tracing consequences, not just immediately, but deeply across time. Because the first effect of a decision is almost never its most important one. Epictetus said, when you are about to undertake something, remind yourself what kind of thing it is. What he meant is simple. Don't just ask what a choice will get you. Ask what it will cost you. What habits will it build? What character will it shape? What doors will it silently close behind you? The Stoics understood that every decision sets a direction. It plants a seed that grows quietly, sometimes into a tree you didn't intend to nurture. And this is why you must look beyond the moment, to the trajectory, to the ripple effects. A powerful tool for this is the 10-10-10 rule. Ask yourself, how will I feel about this in 10 minutes? In 10 months? In 10 years? That simple framework pulls you out of emotional short-termism and into a long-term perspective that reveals what truly matters. Let's say someone disrespects you. Your impulse is to snap back, prove your point, win the moment. But if you apply the 10-10-10 rule, a different picture emerges. In 10 minutes, you'll feel powerful. In 10 months, probably regretful. In 10 years, you won't even remember their name. But you'll still live with the kind of person you chose to be. That's the consequence that counts. Or imagine being offered a high-paying job that goes against your values. In the short term, it feels like progress. But what about the slow erosion of your peace? What about the version of yourself you have to become to survive that environment? These are questions most people avoid because the answers are inconvenient. But the Stoic doesn't flinch. The Stoic looks directly at the trade-offs. Steve Jobs famously said, "It's only by saying no that you can concentrate on the things that are really important." He understood that every yes contains a hidden no. Every opportunity pursued is another one declined. If you don't calculate those trade-offs, you're not making a decision, you're being carried by momentum. Marcus Aurelius put it even more directly. He wrote, "A man's worth is no greater than the worth of his ambitions. And ambitions, if left unexamined, will lead you far from where you actually want to be." That's why he journaled every day, to evaluate, to weigh, to clarify. So what does this look like in practice? When you're making a decision, take time to map it out. Ask, what's the best possible outcome here? What's the worst? What character traits does this choice reinforce? Am I being pulled by principle or pushed by pressure? The Stoic doesn't seek control over outcomes. They seek control over their process. That means not just asking, what if this goes right? But also, what will this make of me, even if it doesn't? Jeff Bezos used a variation of this mindset when deciding to start Amazon. He imagined himself at age 80. Looking back, would he regret not trying? That lens, long-term regret minimization, helped him face uncertainty with clarity. It wasn't optimism, it was perspective. Every consequence is a mirror. It reflects who you are becoming, not just what you are achieving. So don't just weigh options by their rewards. Weigh them by their legacy. Because wisdom isn't about knowing what's easy, it's about choosing what's enduring. And the more you think in consequences, the fewer regrets you carry forward.
Number 5.
Look at other perspectives. If you only see the world through your own eyes, you will always see it incompletely. And that partial vision leads to poor judgment. Stoic philosophy demands something far more difficult and far more powerful. The ability to step outside yourself, to see as others see, to understand what you don't naturally understand. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, whenever you are about to find fault with someone, ask yourself the following question. What fault of mine most nearly resembles the one I'm about to criticize? That is not just humility, that is strategic empathy, the awareness that your mind has blind spots and that truth often hides in someone else's experience. The reason this matters is simple. Clarity lives at the intersection of perspectives. If you can only think from your context, your emotions, and your background, you will never access the full picture. And half a picture is dangerous when you're making decisions that affect your future. The Stoics train their minds to stretch, to understand the other side, not to agree with it, but to test their own reasoning. Epictetus advised, you should not be angry at someone who acts out of ignorance, any more than you would be angry at a blind man for bumping into you. That level of perspective-taking isn't weakness, it's mental strength. Consider Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Prize-winning psychologist and author of Thinking Fast and Slow. His entire career was built around identifying the ways human thinking fails. And one of the most consistent patterns is this. We assume our perception is reality, but it's not. It's just our version of it. And the only way to break that illusion is to deliberately adopt other viewpoints. Let's take a practical example. Imagine you're leading a project and someone on your team is dragging their feet. Your instinct might be frustration. They're lazy. But what if you paused and asked, what pressure might they be under that I can't see? What constraints, what fears, what unspoken challenges? That single shift in perspective transforms the emotional reaction into a thoughtful one. It doesn't mean you excuse poor behavior. It means you understand it before you judge it. Now apply that lens to your own story. How many of your enemies were actually confused people? How many arguments were misunderstandings? How much regret could you have spared if you had just paused and said, maybe there's something I'm missing? This doesn't just improve your relationships, it sharpens your logic. When you entertain opposing views, your beliefs are forced to stand trial, and weak ones collapse. Strong ones are refined. Either way, you grow. Charlie Munger once said, I never allow myself to have an opinion on anything that I don't know the other side's argument better than they do. That's not just intelligence. That's restraint. That's wisdom. And it's rare. The Stoic practice here is simple but demanding. When faced with a decision, mentally rotate the problem. Ask, how would someone with opposite values see this? What would I think if I were older, younger, richer, poorer? This rotation reveals your hidden assumptions, and assumptions are the silent killers of sound judgment. This isn't about people-pleasing or indecision. It's about building mental range, because truth doesn't always stand in your corner. Sometimes it stands across the room, and it takes humility to walk over and hear it out. So stretch your perspective. Not to dilute your values, but to strengthen your thinking. The wider your lens, the clearer your vision, and clarity in the Stoic mind is everything. To see clearly, you must see beyond yourself, and that begins by having the courage to admit you might be wrong. Only then can you begin to be right. Number 6, evaluate and prioritize options. Clarity doesn't come from knowing all the options. It comes from knowing which ones matter most. One of the most common traps in thinking is analysis paralysis. We get overwhelmed not because we lack choices, but because we've never trained our mind to rank them. The Stoics approach this through the lens of values. What is essential? What is trivial? What aligns with nature? And what merely distracts from it? Marcus Aurelius put it plainly, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. That's not a vague ideal, that's a filter, a compass for sorting choices that feel equally tempting. But modern life doesn't make this easy. You're flooded with alternatives. Algorithms show you new paths every second. And without a system to weigh those options, your energy gets divided, your attention scattered, and your power diluted. So here's what the Stoic mind does. It builds a hierarchy of values before the moment of pressure. It defines in calm what will matter during chaos. That means writing down your top 3 life goals. Then, when choices appear, you weigh them against those goals like a scale. If an option moves you closer, consider it. If it moves you sideways or worse, backwards, discard it. Jeff Bezos uses a similar framework called regret minimization. He asks, at age 80, which decision would I least regret? It's not about what feels good now, but what will feel aligned later. That's wisdom. Thinking for your future self, not your present emotion. Another powerful filter is the hell yes or no principle made famous by Derek Sivers. If something doesn't light you up, if it's not a full-bodied yes, it's a no. Why? Because every maybe drains focus. The Stoics knew this. Seneca warned that life is long if you know how to use it, and you can't use it well if your energy is trapped in indecision. Consider Steve Jobs again. He often said that focus is not about saying yes, it's about saying no to 100 other things. He prioritized like a Stoic. With brutal clarity, Apple's simplicity wasn't accidental. It was a product of disciplined thinking. But this discipline only works if you commit to a process. That's why it helps to create your own decision matrix. A simple table. List your options across the top, down the side. Write your non-negotiables, things like freedom, meaning, growth, integrity. Then score each choice from 1 to 10. Don't overthink. Trust your gut, but ground it in principle. Imagine you have 5 job offers. Each one has perks. Each one has trade-offs. What do? You don't chase the biggest salary. You don't follow the loudest opinion. You score them side by side through your own lens. The job with the highest cumulative score. That's your path, not the one that looks best to others, not the one with the most prestige, but the one that aligns with your values. Because that's what Stoic decision-making is. Value-centered. You don't chase the most shiny option. You choose the most true one, the one that honors your principles, the one that builds your character. It's not about perfection, it's about direction. And when your direction is clear, decisions become lighter, simpler, cleaner. So before you choose, pause. Don't just ask, what can I do? Ask, which of these serves who I'm becoming? And don't just look for opportunities, look for alignment. The Stoic mind isn't swayed by options. It's grounded in principles. And from that foundation, every choice becomes easier. Not because it's obvious, but because you've trained your judgment to see what really matters. A wise life isn't built by choosing everything. It's built by choosing what counts and letting the rest go. Number 7. Implement decisions and reflect. A decision is not the end of thinking, it's the beginning of action. And action for the Stoic is not a sprint, it's a cycle. Decide, act, reflect, adjust, repeat. That's how clarity becomes competence and how competence becomes wisdom. The modern world glorifies decision-making. People obsess over the perfect choice. But the truth is, even a perfect choice is powerless if you don't move. Epictetus said, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. And the only way to embody what you believe is through consistent, disciplined action. However, implementation without reflection is just motion. You can be busy and still be lost. That's why the Stoics treated every decision as an experiment. You choose, you act, then you study the result. Not to punish yourself, but to refine your judgment. Marcus Aurelius wrote daily not just to observe the world, but to examine himself. His journal was a mirror, a place to see where he fell short, where he succeeded, and where he still needed to grow. This practice of reflection turns mistakes into feedback and success into structure. It's what transforms a single decision into a system for future choices. Let's say you decide to adopt a morning routine. Waking up earlier, meditating, journaling. You stick with it for 30 days. But what then? A Stoic doesn't just look at whether the routine felt good. They ask deeper questions. Did this routine move me closer to who I want to become? Did it make me more stable, more focused, more disciplined? What got in the way? What helped? These are not just productivity hacks. They're spiritual diagnostics. Ray Dalio, one of the most successful investors of our time, attributes much of his growth to a practice he calls pain plus reflection equals progress. When something goes wrong, he doesn't bury it. He dissects it, not emotionally, analytically. That's how a Stoic treats setbacks, not as shame, but as study material. And this doesn't just apply to big decisions. Even small habits demand reflection. You try a new approach to managing conflict. Did it de-escalate the situation? Did it cost you your peace? Did it reflect your values or just your pride? The Stoic doesn't react and move on. They review, always. That's why Seneca wrote, "When the light has been removed and my wife has fallen silent, I examine my entire day." This wasn't a ritual for shame. It was a ritual for sharpening. The goal is not guilt. The goal is growth. Without reflection, you keep repeating old patterns under new disguises. But here's what most people get wrong. They think reflection must be perfect, that it requires hours or some special format. It doesn't. A single honest sentence at the end of your day is more powerful than 100 unchecked thoughts. What did I learn today? What did I do that was beneath my standard? What am I proud of? These questions don't take time, they take courage. So how do you build this into your life? Set a time each evening, even just 5 minutes. Write down one decision you made, then ask, what was my intent? What was the outcome? What will I keep and what will I change next time? This practice builds something the Stoics prized above all. Wisdom earned, not imagined. Clarity tested in the real world. Thinking that leads to action, and action that loops back into better thinking. Implement your choices, but don't disappear into them. Return, reflect, refine. That's how you develop judgment that lasts, not just for one decision, but for a lifetime. Because it's not about being right all the time. It's about becoming wiser over time. One choice at a time, one reflection at a time. That's the Stoic way. Most people live their lives reacting, drifting, hoping their next decision will be better than the last, without ever learning why the last one failed, but not you, not anymore. You now carry 7 Stoic tools, each one designed to protect your clarity, sharpen your judgment, and align your life with what truly matters. Remember, wisdom isn't built in a day. It's built in the quiet moments. When you pause instead of react. When you question instead of assume. When you reflect instead of run. That's how you move from chaos to clarity, from noise to discipline, from impulse to peace. If this video gave you even one idea worth keeping, hit that like button. Subscribe for more Stoic tools to build your inner fortress, and share this with someone who's ready to stop guessing and start thinking with purpose. Stay sharp, stay grounded, and as always, choose what aligns, not what reacts.